Meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste.
Dear guests, ladies and gentlemen, I welcome you most warmly on the occasion of our event Heilsbringer or High-Risk Technology, how to handle the opportunities and risks of artificial intelligence at the state representation. I'm Stefan Erdner. I'm the head of this institution. I'm so happy that you've joined us here and also that you've switched on in the stream. We'll have that in English and German in the stream. Artificial intelligence, like I said, is something everybody keeps talking about since ChatGPT, Midjourney company, have made that accessible for everybody. I think it's become known to the broad public what algorithms can do now, how strong they may change our lives. And this is why it's not only speeding up the development of AI that you can observe, but also a dynamic debate about how we'll handle and go about AI. So as you will know, at the European level now, the regulation of AI is being discussed. The European Parliament is dealing with it with a worldwide first regulation draft, which has certain stages that reflects the terms that we've got now, where it's from low risk to banned AI technologies. That is the range, and the European Parliament in the trial with the member states is to move it further. Also at the UN level, AI is being in the discussion. Maybe you've learned and heard about it. The UN Secretary General Guterres suggested the other day that one of the UN regulation agency for AI should be set up. And in the end, also, of course, AI researchers themselves warned against the AI risks, ironically, so to speak. Those that are strongly involved in the development of AI, they warn against the high risks, and they demand that the risks be minimized, and that with a priority top-notch, like the fight against nuclear arms or the pandemic. You can say that it's rather the risks associated with AI that is in the focus now, and less the opportunities that are associated with AI. So these opportunities undeniably are very big, bearing in mind medical progress, where I think you may say that the biggest hopes to fight fatal injuries, lethal diseases such as cancer, that with the height of big data you have personalized diagnostics that can be developed. And I think looking at a totally different challenge, such as the climate crisis, you may come to the conclusion, indeed, that with the help of AI, that could be leading to progress in that crisis that we can't manage without. So Baden-Württemberg banks on the development of AI. We're promoting it in research and development. We are sort of proud that Baden-Württemberg has turned into a real hotspot in the field of artificial intelligence. Let me give you just three examples for all. With the Cyber Valley around Tübingen, we have a true beacon, a lighthouse project in machine learning that we have 1,000 researchers are party to it through various networks. We've been funding it with 165 million euros since its inception. 250 million will be spent next year on that. Is a real lighthouse issue. Looking at the pertinent publications, that Super Valley is at the helm of the European development, and I truly think this is a success that Baden-Württemberg may be proud of. Secondly, in Heilbronn, we're building a new AI ecosystem on a 23-hectare campus together with the Schwarz Foundation. A huge AI value creation center will be built up from research and development to commercialization, indeed. And we're sort of proud as well that with the Heidelberg startup Aleph Alpha, you can say the European role model company in AI comes from Baden-Württemberg likewise. We, as the state government, work together with Aleph Alpha, and this stands pars pro toto for a growing AI startup scene in the Ländle. So we're well on the way in AI, and we want to contribute truly for Europe to move on in that central technology. I think the challenges are great. The European Commission figured out that investment gap of Europe compared to the US and to China is between 4 and 8 billion euros. So talking about regulation and how to handle AI in Europe, we also need to talk about regulation to be shaped in such a way that innovative capacities in Europe are retained. Of course, we couldn't do that if we set standards for companies not to be competitive any longer. We would get into complex dependencies which we want to avoid. Another thought of mine, before I move over to the panel, let's not talk about regulation only. No, on principle, we have to find a consensus about how we'll handle AI as a company. In schools and universities, just beginning in the small scale where debates are undertaken, what authorship means, how authentic texts can be distinguished from manipulated texts and sounds, and how, all in all, we will handle those instruments. This will be a debate in the social sphere all around. I'm very happy that such questions, but also the tough question for regulation, will be discussed today with people who know their way around this issue. I look forward to the conversation here on the panel. For Álvarez, I'll hand over to her, Deputy Head of the Business Section of WirtschaftsWoche, who will moderate the talk and who will introduce the guests of the panel as well. Thank you for the moderation. Thank you. Great big thank you for the wonderful welcome. Thanks for the introduction. This has been an opportunities-oriented kick-off. Very good. I'm happy that I can accompany you this evening on the screens out there and here in the conference room. You couldn't have been dealing with a better topic tonight than with artificial intelligence. I'm very happy to take you along tonight. It's about the Kurpfalz, it's about California, world market leaders of today and tomorrow. It's about rules that are broken, rules which are set, and it is about the question of technology. Is that the big question, the big risk, or rather the snail-type speed in Europe? Not only I can ask questions, but also you may ask questions in the chat, which will be passed on to me, and later on also, of course, here in the room, we have hand mics to go round. And I'm very happy to have 4 outstanding guests, and as can't be different, we have an analog stage which is represented by a virtual stage, so to speak. First, let me welcome Dr. Anna Christmann, member of the Parliament for the Greens, Commissioner for Digital Economy and coordinator of startups. And she said we are too much bound by the theoretical debate about regulation. This was 2020. Is that still true today in the era of ChatGPT? Very warm welcome. Thanks for having joined us, Dr. Christmann. And let me also welcome here on stage Professor Christian Stöcker, the author and head of digital communication course at the College for Applied Sciences in Hamburg. For years has he been dealing with artificial intelligence. He says we speedily need a robot act. We'll check out. Thank you for having joined us. Welcome. And 2 high-ranking guests are connected virtually. I'm very happy. Dr. Lucilla Sioli, Director for AI and Digital Industry with DG Connect, the European Commission. She says Europe wants to have a leading role in progressive technologies that is human-centered and ethically laid out. That sounds good, but can it work out wonderfully? Thank you for joining us from Brussels. And likewise, we have Jonas Andrulis, whom I mentioned before, who used to work for Apple, developing AI, and today is the co-founder and CEO of the startup Aleph Alpha. He says Terminator fantasies are sort of too Hollywood in the development, yet the technology can also turn democratic values upside down. We'll talk about that. Welcome, Mr. Andrulis. Great to have you. And I would say, Mr. Andrulis, just for practical terms, take us along on artificial intelligence. What is it? Why does everybody talk about an AI revolution?
Sehr, sehr gerne.
I'm happy to. Meanwhile, everything has to be AI.
Also machen wir mal einen kurzen Überflug.
Let's briefly
Wovon reden wir eigentlich?
screen it. What are we talking about?
Turbulente Zeiten.
Turbulent times.
Viel erwähnt wird die sogenannte
What's mentioned often is the Industrial Revolution, that AI takes a similar, touches off a similar development like electricity previously or computers did. There are various estimates. One assumes that by 2030, about 14% of global value creation will be with AI. Of course, that's gigantic volumes that are being invested, even today, that turn our world order upside down, or they may do so. What's happening? Well, these are models, self-supervised models, as they're called, that read loads of textbooks on the web, and they keep learning to write texts further on. In this example, our model, the sentence a long, long time ago, and then 100%. The model is very short. To end that sentence, if I write that, I would love best, then it's not so clearly how to carry on. 4% probability, like with a big ration of salad, that's very healthy. If I were to say the capital of Germany is Berlin, comes as a solution. So by the autocomplete that we have on our mobile phones, we see this is a gigantic dimension of text, of words. We have sort of a common knowledge, we have understanding for people and their perspectives. And we have a context understanding and interaction with people. This is what ChatGPT has been doing. Again, a marketing genius. The launch, you may have seen that the chatbot from the Tobacco study not only gives better medical replies, but also will master legal exams and business exams and will pass the exam. And the evaluation says that not only is the AI quality higher, but it's also more sympathetic. Well, you would say it was going to be difficult for chatbots or for AI, and then AI now keeps surprising us. Yes, what are the problems around broad issue where I say, if a person is overtaken just before the target line in a race, ChatGPT will say, then I am in the first place, so I win the race. So, no, probably not. Let's ask our model, which says if you have overtaken the second person, you're not on the first, you're in the second position. I'm not saying that our AI is right all the time, and OpenAI does not. It means well, it's about thinking, considering the AI systems currently are often beside the point and are wrong. I asked ChatGPT about a publication together with Katja Kerstin. And ChatGPT says, yes, that publication said you did that with a renowned scientist. You wrote a paper together with it. That paper is Deep Block. The paper does exist, but neither Christian Kerstin nor I are the authors. So factually wrong information that is passed on, but all sounds absolutely plausible. So we have a problem, yes. And a few weeks ago, we published our own research. Now we can review the statements and trace the statements back to their sources, positively and negatively. There's an article about us, and when I review that Aleph Alpha is an ideal partner in the critical environments, I click that, and where does this statement come from? That statement of the article is seen as the source. The source is stated indeed, where I say Aleph Alpha comes from Karlsruhe. You can see it's in blue, there's a negative impact, and I'm referring to Heidelberg. This means people are empowered to review that. What, as a person, do I need to review that? I have to be able to analyze the context and the source and understand different information. Of course, it also goes with pictures, photos from Heidelberg, a beautiful sunset over the city, says the AI. If you click sunset, no, this part is the proof of the pudding. So we can make that auditable, we can flow the factual knowledge. We showed that with the factoring at the Hanover Fair with complex data. It was well received, but also with administration, with the State Ministry of Baden-Württemberg. The Baden-Württemberg administration is word top of the list. No others have generative AI as Baden-Württemberg does, nowhere else in the world. So these are the options for digitalization. What's important in the industrial revolution to remain sovereign. Sovereignty of data, we all know that. We have to watch for our data, but also sovereignty in the operation. Who can turn off the electricity or the power? Can we have our own value creation, our critical processes today and tomorrow? Sovereignty over algorithms. Who shapes the algorithms? Who determines what result they shall produce? ChatGPT, if you get a controversial ask a question, you get a controversial Californian reply. We should shape the world that our children experience ourselves. We need value creation that AI may produce, and the challenge of the cultural, social, political challenges of this industrial revolution need to be shaped by us. And ideally, we should ensure that not everything goes to the Microsoft shareholders. US-EU relationship, the US invests $100 billion specifically because they want to dominate the market. They know this fundamental technology will shape the whole future, and they want a controlling position for themselves. We need to be a strong player ourselves, of course, with the US as a friend, but we have to be in a position to live our values, our targets, to determine the objectives and install them ourselves. This is possible with our competence only. This is an overview.
Thank you very much, Mr. Andrulis, for the first introduction to this topic.
Ich würde gerne gleich auch noch
Now
einmal
I
bei
would
Ihnen
like
bleiben. Und
to
zwar hatte ich ja
stay
eingangs
with you. At the beginning, I mentioned that you already worked for Apple and developed AI for them. And now you're in the Kurpfalz, you have your own AI startup. So maybe you can just make a comparison. What kind of obstacles do you see here in Germany which you did not see in California or the US? Well, I think that there are two main things. One is the funding side. It is more difficult in Europe, or more specifically in Germany, to get funding, to conduct funding rounds. Nevertheless, we managed to do that so far, and we managed to achieve a few things where friends told me beforehand this would be impossible to get European funding. So we conducted two funding rounds, which were almost entirely European, so we are quite a European and sovereign company. We built our own data system, and we have the strongest AI cluster in Europe. So funding is one issue, and then the whole landscape of companies, of partners, is not that innovation-driven. So 50% of all the funds that are spent on software are spent in the US. And this is why we have strong partners and clients in the US too. But here we are surrounded by the best universities in the world in this segment, and we feel quite comfortable here. And is there something that is running more smoothly here than in the US or California? Well, not necessarily better or more smoothly, but the universities are phenomenal. So 1 hour away from Heidelberg, we have several high-level universities. And one thing that I like better here is the social cohesion. I'm fully convinced that in Europe we have a civil society and a culture and a living together which is or should be striven for. So this is why we managed to get some Google researchers also to Heidelberg. Ms. Christmann, Mr. Andrulis already mentioned how comfortable it feels in Baden-Württemberg, and he also pointed out the advantages, but also the challenges. So you yourself are in the economics ministry and are looking into the digital economy and startups. So can you provide hope to people like Mr. Andrulis that the difficulties might be overcome, so at least that we were able to catch up eventually? Well, first of all, I would like to fully support that it's very important for our sovereignty and the sovereign shaping of our future. It's very decisive that these companies are here and that we develop AI ourselves here in Europe. So apart from the regulation that we'll talk about later on, it's part of it. It's the essence. If you only regulate but have no idea of the technology, of course, it's of no use. This is what I would like to say in advance. And the question is, how do we do it? One of the topics that has been mentioned already is funding in Europe. So this applies to AI companies, but also to other startups. And I can give you hope insofar as this is one of the top topics of our startup strategy that we've passed last year. And I really have the impression that at the moment we have many instruments that will be launched now at once. And this morning I was at the roadshow of the European Tech Champion Initiative, ETCI, where together with partners, Germany, France, Italy, Spain and Belgium, and we hope that more will join in, have managed to put 4 billion into a European tech umbrella fund, which then should invest into European funds in order to create bigger funds. And this is something that is, of course, very important for AI companies in particular, that they can not only start in Europe, but can grow in Europe and stay in Europe. So we want to create a better capital scene, a venture capital scene that can invest in these kind of companies. And we also have a climate fund with 1 billion euros. So a lot is going on at the moment, and I think that this might really become a turning point for Europe. Well, if we look at the AI strategy, then of course there's no lack of funding. Mr. Stöcker, we've already heard that there are several AI projects with regard to application and research in Baden-Württemberg, and also at the national level we have an AI strategy. So over time the budgets have been allocated with 5 billion euros, but so far only 1.3 billion euros have actually been allocated here. So is this sufficient as a strategy? Well, already at the time I said that, or put differently, Angela Merkel, in the course of this AI strategy, said that Germany and Europe have to be leading in the world, and a leading position in the world in the field of AI. And this is quite an ambitious target in view of the current situation. And of course, we will not manage to do that with 5 billion euros. The region Shenzhen in China, I think, throughout the same period, has invested a 2-digit billion amount into AI. And so the 5 billion that we allocate will be spread over a period of 5 years, I guess, or 3 years, up until 2025. So this is actually an extremely small amount per year. So this will be insufficient. So you cannot OpenAI has just received 10 billion from Microsoft, just one company, and we spread 5 billion over a period of several years over all the companies and universities. So there is, this is too little. This is a fact. And we have actually lost ground because we reacted very slowly. And I think in 2017, or at the beginning of 2017, there was a hearing in the German Bundestag on social borders and disinformation on the internet. And I looked at the minutes recently, and during the hearing I said at the time, well, I think when we look at the development of AI, we will soon need a law which says that the machine needs to tell me that it's a machine before it starts talking to me. And people were laughing out loud and were, well, in disbelief, basically. And this was 2017. And so also the political Berlin has been very hesitant, basically, and not seen the signals. And if we are honest, we have to say no single party can be excluded, but Ms. Christmann is lucky that she wasn't part of the government at the time. Well, let's wait and see if there is an improvement now. So I think we have to be much quicker and invest much more. And Ms. Andrulis has already described the great higher education system in the region and network in the region, but we are not where we should be, or where Stanford or ETH Zurich is, or other US universities, or French universities, for example. So they have way more top papers at the large AI conferences. So we really have to catch up here, and the professorships or chairs that are out there, many of them are still unfilled, unoccupied. So I think the push is still waiting, and it's not yet there. Well, this is a good point of time to broaden our view and to switch to Ms. Sioli in Brussels. You do not only look at the EU states, but also the US and China. So where is Germany from your point of view, and where is the EU in comparison to the international level and the international competition? Maybe you can say a few words about that. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot for the question, and apologies for not speaking German. Germany is well placed, mostly because Jonas Andrulis is there, and he's obviously offering one of the very few European-made large artificial intelligence models. So we very much count on his experience and his talent remaining in Europe. But we are also aware of problems that may arise in terms of funding, as he has already indicated. And this is what is a real problem in the European Union, because we see other experiences, for example, the Bloom model or others, which has then been taken over by American capital. And of course, the United States are our allies, and so there is no problem with that. On the other hand, as it was said by the previous speakers, a large artificial intelligence model is also a way of reflecting our values and our thinking. And these models will be used by enterprises in all the sectors of the economy and by professionals in different sectors to undertake different tasks. And so it's very important that not only they speak our languages, but also that they really reflect our values in terms of fundamental rights, in terms of safety, in terms of trying to avoid disinformation, which is obviously a very important topic that Europe is addressing. But as it was said earlier, the European Union is not yet probably as advanced in terms of number of models as the United States and China. But we are going to try to do our best to do so. One of the main issues, I mean, I heard before the comments about the fact that Baden-Württemberg doesn't have sufficient funding, or Germany at the end will not have sufficient funding, is exactly the fact that Germany invests on its own models, and France will do the same, and Italy will do the same. And what we are missing in the European Union is our ability to cooperate in funding these large models. I think it would be much more easily at the European level to be able to federate these resources. We would have many more resources to make available to our developers and our researchers. And I certainly underline the importance of university and research, as it was highlighted also before by the previous speakers, but we need to do more to be able to align and federate our community in the European Union. It's not easy because we don't have instruments to do that. For example, in other areas, I'll give you the example of semiconductors. We have a partnership with member states and industry, and for every euro invested by the European Union in a certain project, we will have €1 from the member states and we will have €2 from industry. Now, it would be nice to have something like this for artificial intelligence as well, because this would really help to federate all the national investments towards common objectives, because these objectives are too big to be addressed by single member states alone. So I hope that this is something we can do together in the future. And maybe another support we can bring from the side of the European Union in the short term is to bring computing facilities, because computing capacities are expensive. And maybe one difference between some of the budget that has been given in the United States is exactly to be able to use the computing capacity. In the European Union, we have supercomputers that are paid by the European Union and by the member states. And we are working to be able to dedicate capacity of the supercomputers exactly for AI and for the large models, so that the developers don't have to participate to uncertain competitions before they're told they can use the supercomputers. And so we intend in the future to facilitate the life of the developers, at least from the point of view of the computing capability, which, as I said, are pretty expensive.
Frau Sioli, Sie haben das jetzt gerade beschrieben. Sie haben gesagt, das wäre nice, also schön, wenn es so einen gemeinsamen Ansatz in der Europäischen Union gibt. Aber seien Sie mal realistisch. Gibt es tatsächlich eine Chance, dass das passiert?
Is there an opportunity? Is there a chance that this might happen? Or will every individual member state continue to work on its own with its own funds?
Well, at the moment, we don't really have a mechanism to be able to bring all these funds from the different parties together. We are working on possible solutions to this problem. It will take some time, but I think it's really fundamental that we pay attention to the fact that we don't spend in all different ways in the European Union, and at the end we are missing scale, which is what really the developers of the large models probably need.
Liebes Publikum, bevor wir jetzt gleich das Thema Regulierung noch einmal vertiefen, würde ich gerne von Ihnen wissen, was Sie denn so eigentlich meinen. Wird Europa bei der Entwicklung von KI eine wichtige Rolle spielen? Ich bin gespannt auf Ihre Antworten. Sie können sich virtuell und auch hier im Publikum an der Umfrage via Slido beteiligen. Wir sehen gleich das Ergebnis. Bevor das kommt, würde ich sagen, starten wir aber mit dem Regulierungsbuch. Frau Sioli, es ist ja morgen ein spannender Termin, der das EU-Parlament bringt, den...
Anna?
Genau. Sie hören uns hoffentlich weiter. Genau. Sie haben... Seit 2018 wird am AI-Act gearbeitet, der zum Goldstandard werden soll für die KI-Regulierung. Morgen ist ein wichtiger Termin. Das
EU-Parliament will submit its position, and then there will be the so-called trilogue procedure. So maybe you can briefly explain, what does AI do that it's so dangerous that we need regulation at all?
Falls wir Frau Sioli verloren haben in Brüssel.
Could you still hear us?
Sie beschäftigen sich auch mit dem Thema Regulierung.
Frau Christmann, you're also dealing with regulation. We can't count all the elections that we've had. People tried, Sam Altman from ChatGPT, that AI could be dangerous like a nuclear threat or like a pandemic to extinguish humanity. Well, I think in Europe, on the one hand, a path that we've taken is not so bad. We've been dealing with this issue for quite a while, not only, yes, it's true, but it's true that some rules are necessary, and we're at the helm of the development, topping the agenda. And is it sensible? This is what we all want or don't want. That is a social story. It's about the AI Act. We don't want people to be rated by machines, or that the state can use that rating, like question in biometric reconnaissance. It should not be used for widespread monitoring and surveillance. There are debates all around, but it's obvious to see what European values, what human values mean. It's correct that there will be the AI Act, but in detail, on the other hand, you have to watch out that certainly you're not overdoing it. And the debate right now with ChatGPT, what can be tested, it's intensified. We briefly talked about it. The technological difference is not that big. It's not such a great leap forward. We're having an intensive debate. How can it be regulated? So go live into that debate, the regulation debate. We burst into it, and you can see it brings difficulties with it. Certainly, it could be wrong, where we claim now at a stage where you have certain ways. Aleph Alpha is one example where we have models beginning to have higher hurdles, so that we couldn't go into the development. I think this is the pros and cons that you have to weigh very carefully, that we're doing in the federal government quite cautiously. We are waiting for the positioning of the European Parliament, of course. From my point of view, it would be wrong to react with panic and say we have to build up high obstacles. So we get all the information, the letters come in astonishingly. Stefan Enter said that in the introduction, from people who've been developing it all the time. We know that in Europe we have to be cautious, where the Americans say, what are we going to do? We need regulation. We take it over without filtering it here in Europe. We haven't got such a ecosystem of AI like in the US. We have a different starting position in our discussion. Sure, you've got to ask from time to time if regulation is easier to master for the big companies than the little ones that are sprouting here in Europe. These are issues that are necessary. Well, regulation, who would it harm? And Andrulis with Aleph Alpha. Mr. Andrulis, would you fear that with the AI Act you're regulated down before you have the option to grow?
Also es ist auf jeden Fall etwas.
Certainly. This is something that drives us round. It doesn't make life easier. It does not speed up development. Applied AI had a survey where a large part of entrepreneurs and investors have saying the AI Act will lead to them investing less into AI in Europe, or even will move into the US, over to the US with their company. That's a true threat. Even without the AI Act, we would be fighting for our survival against stronger and bigger players. And the additional resources, they slow down the development here, not only here with us and our customers. It reduces our options for us to make it work, to win it. These are two different things. As it was mentioned, there are some applications of AI that we do not want. And I've shared that absolutely. I'm on the same content level, like everything that's being applied in the medical field rightly is subjected to very tough criticism, tough testing procedures. What we're doing with the AI Act is a fundamental basic technology to be regulated, not only application. We're not only saying this kind of application should not happen. No, we're regulating it down to the basic technology. One more comment, if I may, to rescue German policymakers' honor. The German Parliament, the Enquete Commission on AI that we had recently, didn't do such bad work. No, the Enquete Commission has the trimmings that the results do not get implemented right away. That's true. But the report from the AI Enquete Commission said that we have application-oriented monitoring that it takes in the sectors where regulation is needed, where there is regulation going on anyway. So you may wonder, why would something new be set up in AI regulation where there was no critical sphere? Okay, medicine has been regulated, that's true, but saying that for other fields where you have to specify AI, this is something that the Enquete Commission clearly says. The basic idea of the AI Act has been high-risk sectors, but in the debate it's been getting lost, or it seems to be getting lost, because with the foundation model, they think they made it work nicely. I feel it's a difficult debate we're having. It all prolongs the whole thing, and it takes it into broader fields, and the Bundestag thought differently. Over to you in Brussels. I hope you can hear us again, Ms. Sioli. We've heard from Mr. Andrulis that actually he fears that he can't use the opportunities on account of too big regulation. Could you share those fears? Do you understand the fears and relieve his sorrow or concern?
No, I certainly understand his fears, in particular because it's a small company. It's a relatively small company, Aleph Alpha. And so I understand the fears also of the startups, which are among the main developers of AI in the European Union. What we are planning to do is to really help companies and startups to facilitate the way they can see if they are compliant with regulation. For example, we are setting up regulatory sandboxes, and we are also developing now a project to make sure that we can actually accompany them in the regulatory sandboxes. We're not going to make the regulatory sandboxes expensive, in other words. So it's a process that will take some time, but the AI Act will not enter in force immediately, and this gives us some time for companies to adapt. But of course, we still think that the AI Act is essential. As it was reminded by the previous speaker, it is not about artificial intelligence in general, but only about AI applied in certain high-risk applications. And it is true that the European Parliament has prolonged the list of the high-risk applications for the Artificial Intelligence Act, but now we will be having discussions, Commission, European Parliament, and European Council, meaning the Member States, exactly to finalize also this list of high-risk applications. So we hope to have a contained list that is really workable, because we are only interested in regulating where there is a high risk of violation of fundamental rights and safety. And when it comes to safety, well, many of the sectors at hand are already regulated, like healthcare. If you apply an AI in a robot that you use in healthcare, you would in any case have to check it before you put it on the market for safety. And we simply require that these checks also look at the artificial intelligence system that is a component of that particular robot. So we have really tried to make a proposal which takes into account existing legislation, does not increase the burden on companies, and we think that there is a minimum level of requirements which are necessary, which are probably what good data scientists already do when they develop high-risk kind of applications. So I don't expect the burden on companies to be as high as sometimes it is described. And I have to say that the fact that we have the Artificial Intelligence Act also makes us in a very crucial position when it comes to have the international discussions on AI. And we will see with the Parliament and the Council how we will want to approach general purpose artificial intelligence, like the large models, like the large language model of Aleph Alpha. It's not necessarily going to be considered high risk. So, but we will be probably, I cannot anticipate what will be discussed and what will be decided. But I think internationally, I have the feeling that there is an interest in being able to audit or test certain parts of these models, at least to make sure that we keep certain aspects under control, like disinformation, for example.
Herr Stöcker, man kann ja eigentlich Algorithmen nicht in gut und böse
Mr. Stöcker, you
einteilen,
can't distinguish algorithms in good and bad, I would say. This is not a category. How optimistic would you be that it will succeed to regulate AI in such a way that it doesn't transgress certain borders? In Germany and the EU, the progress should not be slowed down. I think the discussion is sort of not on the point. It's great for the EU to draft a law, great, but the AI Act regulates, as far as I know now, generative systems, not really. It is yesterday's AI. That's a debate at the European Parliament. That's a problem. We have an exponential development that's been ongoing for about 15 years. The curve gets steeper and steeper, and this is still the case. In the run-up, I talked with a colleague. The number of parameters in AI models over the past 5-6 years, there's GPT, GPT-2 and 3, and then Microsoft comes up. Up here, you'll have to enlarge the picture with GPT-3 with 175 million parameters, and GPT-4 will have how many? We don't know. Nobody's going to let it out, but it will be several trillions, maybe 150 trillion parameters. So an enormously dynamic development. The European regulation, as we know, is anything but not logically dynamic, very dynamic. This faces us with certain problems. It will be agile, yes. It's not an insult, it's just a fact. It's slow. An organization like the EU to regulate something, you have to groups that are party to it all. The second problem, I feel, is, and that was touched several points. We keep talking about AI, and we have something like ChatGPT on the mind. Yes, but also AlphaFold is AI, protein structure predictions. Midjourney is AI, where the Pope may generate a dune jacket. There was an embrace, Biden and Trump embraced. It looks very real. Trump had 6 fingers, all right, but it looks very real. We have a speedy development of a technology that is absolutely fundamental, that's flowing, or like the steam engine. Nobody would say today there are traffic lights and computers and TV and electric cars and washing machines and toasters and street lanterns. Let's do an electricity law and regulate all that. This is what's happening now. It's a speedy discussion about AI regulation. Super that in the AI Act the risk taxonomy is contained. We can put new things into those little boxes. What new things they will be? Sandboxes in 2030. We don't know 2023. I would claim we can only broadly sort of predict what will be the case 2030. 2 years ago, people talked about other things, other language production models, except people are very close to it. Or the fact that you can generate pictures that can hardly be distinguished from photos, and it would happen to videos likewise. A year ago, it was original and funny. Hey, the AI can paint pictures, but we were far away from critical disinformation at the time. But we have exceeded that point by now. And this effect, hey, it's also happening there. We'll keep having that all the time in the future. That's to say, we'll not say we'll do an AI law and we'll embellish it so it's fitting to what's happening in the past 9 months, but then we have a background. This is not the way it is going. Simply, it will be carried on all the time. And all the time, will you have to be ready to check out what's happening right now or next? At the same time, I'll stop right away. There are certain fundamental things that you have to address. For instance, 2010 at the New York Stock Exchange was a flash crash produced by a shrewd Brit in his cellar with the software. High-speed trading systems were out-tricked. And then they sold their shares, and Dow Jones crashed by 1,000 points within a minute. This is the first AI stock exchange crash of history. High-speed trading, of course, can be affected by AI. A good example for what you should not do. Autonomous systems giving access to critical systems, getting access, especially weaponry, armament, regulating autonomous arms is not talked about enough. Nuclear war, first thing we have to truly ensure that's being moved in the US for a bill. Fortunately, never may the machine have access to the red button to touch off the bomb. In Israel, an autonomous swarm of drones was used against an Hamas terrorist, a very bad idea. I would think this is something we do not only need national but also international regulation analog to nuclear arms or mines or scatter ammunition. It takes in many details concrete regulation, and many points you can clearly say and see it's hazardous, it's dangerous. Let's rule it out on a global level, but not in Europe or in Germany only. Europe can use its weight.
Ms. Andrulis, how about you? If in the US not only more money is luring people there, but also less regulation, do you fear that apart from AI startups like Aleph Alpha, other companies might go there? And is this an idea that you're also considering? Yes, of course, either go there or simply they might not grow quickly enough. As simple as that. This is basically our survival factor. We have to grow quickly enough, develop technology which can be rolled out. We have an AI model which is of the size of ChatGPT-3, and we also have partnerships. Many others also have come together in partnerships. And if we do not manage to accelerate our developments in the European market, then of course we have to ask ourselves the question whether we can still move or are we lagging too much behind so that this is no longer possible either. So this is an existential question, basically. And what plays into it is not only that we say that it's, regulation might be difficult, and I know that there are many people who are trying to do a good job. I had many discussions in Brussels as well, and Lucilla, for example, has very good technical understanding and knows about the impact of this regulation. However, there are so many different stakeholders in this field and many different interests, and this in the context of a rapidly developing environment. And many of our partners that we are talking to, they say that this insecurity that goes along with it leads to a hampering of innovation. So many large companies say, well, the regulation is coming up, we do not know how it's going to look like, how we can be compliant, so now we're going to stop with our AI developments. So, Ms. Christmann, when you hear these statements, how alarmed are you that a move to the US might be something that people might consider at Aleph Alpha or other companies? although the German industry might not be competitive in the future without AI. Well, what we do here is that it is actually a problem that it takes so much time. This is actually also the dilemma that Christian Stöcker has mentioned, that we have a technology that is developed very quickly, and we are in the middle of a regulation process, and then there is something new coming up which needs to be incorporated into the regulation, and this leads to a never-ending story where we constantly try to adapt the regulation. It's like a sort of Damocles, and people do not know what is coming up. So one priority is actually to finalize the AI Act. We are not going to not do it, and it's the right thing to do it, but we still have to finalize it, and this needs to be done now. We do not want to wait for much longer, and then there are European elections, and nobody knows what eventually will be implemented. So this is very important that we have this AI Act. And when it comes to the final negotiations, we will, of course, try to have a practical approach. We will bring this into the trilogue negotiations. And I do think that we also have to make sure that this is a regulation of the applications, because there are all the plausible examples also of weaponry. And I can recommend one chapter of the Enquete Commission's report if you would like to read about it. So some aspects are very obvious, and of course they should be part of this regulation. And of course it also needs to be at the global level, not only in Europe, but we should not overdo it. And in some areas we try to reshape the wording. Of course, a set of data cannot be free of errors, or how do you want to prove it that it's free of errors? So these are aspects that we are still trying to change in order to make it more applicable, but eventually we want to finalize it so everyone knows based on what they can work. And of course we have to do everything to support the implementation, especially when it comes to SMUs, small medium-sized enterprises, SMEs, so that they know how they can comply. These are the things that we can do. And at the same time, we want to strengthen the whole ecosystem. And I'd just like to bring up the path of Baden-Württemberg. It's, of course, a good path. Of course, we will not be able to do everything with public funding. We do not have sufficient funds. We cannot spend 20 billion to invest it. I think Stefan wants to say something about it. Yes, and so the idea is, of course, also to leverage private capital. This is what we are doing with these fund instruments, where we say, of course, we will spend public money, but private funding should also be invested here. And so this is basically the idea behind different projects, that we want to build up an ecosystem where, with public funding, we are an anchor investor or anchor client, and thus allow for private capital to be more easily generated. And this is actually one path that we want to continue to into the future. Of course, Europe needs to finalize the AI Act, but at the same time, we have to try to find out at the EU level how we can support AI champions. Mr. Stöcker. Well, I've got an idea which I would like to bring up here, which is quite simple, and I would like to know from Mr. Andrulis what he thinks about it. So, of course, you can implement regulation which helps the European economy by creating a level playing field. What I think is quite remarkable is the fact that OpenAI at GPT-4 does no longer say what the training data set is. So the CTO set data are technology. So basically everything that we can find on the internet, this is all technology, and it all belongs to us. And of course, this is also an issue for the German media landscape, because they have like intellectual property rights, and an AI which now, or maybe in the future, can provide right answers eventually, but it can only do so because it worked with everything that other people have produced. However, they do not get paid for it. I think it's quite problematic. It's also problematic for a different reason. I mean, it would be nice to know if the AI has read Hitler's Mein Kampf or not. I mean, it sounds a little bit naive, but I'm quite serious about it. So what is the data foundation, the data set, and can independent scientists or auditors look into it? Maybe there are highly problematic contents in it or things that are absolutely wrong. So this actually entails many dangers. So at least from the outside, we should be able to look at what these machines are fed with. So this is basically quite an easy step which can be justified in, with regard to legal aspects. And of course, people cannot say, well, the set of data by which we train our AI is our secret source, and it includes things that you do not know. And this is one thing. We shouldn't allow that. And secondly, if, I mean, it's great if OpenAI has actually been fed with the whole scientific past of mankind, basically, and then it might eventually develop a better solar panels or whatever. But for the scientists who have actually worked out this knowledge, it would be great at least to be acknowledged for it, or maybe get a reward for it. But the prerequisite for it is that I know that my work has been fed into the AI. So I'm sorry for asking questions. This is basically my professional disease. But, well, I can give you a brief answer. Well, our model works in a way that we say we want to give sovereignty back to the authorities and to the companies, and it's also maximum flexibility, so we are very transparent, also the model as such. There are strong indications that what we see at ChatGPT-4 is more than simple LLMs, that there is a combination of it, that there is a retrieval, a gating happening there, that the model eventually isn't that big anymore. But from the point of view of operative costs, it makes sense, but they're not transparent about it because they want us to not be sovereign. They want to say that companies say we are using this API, but nobody knows what's actually happening there. And this is really critical that, I mean, we ask the consumers and others that they are responsible when it comes to the utilization of AI, but at the same time, we do not know at all what's behind it. Is it cached? Is there retrieval? Or I mean, it would go too far now, but there's some indications that it's not a mere LLM, but other things are happening there. So we would like to look into the issue of sovereignty in more detail. I would like to ask Ms. Sioli in Brussels. This is a question coming from the audience, so thank you very much for the participation. And the question refers to the AI Act, Ms. Sioli. The person from the audience asked, what is basically the overarching goal of the AI Act? Will this regulatory framework strengthen the competition with the US and Asia, or the competition between the individual member states of the EU?
That's a very good question. So the overall objective from the very beginning has been to enhance the trust in the use of AI, because now we speak and we refer to the fact that companies are may not be willing to develop AI because they are uncertain about the regulation. But in reality, when we did the regulation back in, when we started thinking about it in 2019, I remember we did a survey of companies and asked them if they were using AI or if they were developing AI, and the answer was no, because they were afraid of the impact AI would have, and maybe the consumers would not have used it, would not have used their products because there was an AI in it, and they were afraid of maybe violating privacy or whatever. So there was a lot of uncertainty in the absence of regulation. Now, I think for the provision of these large AI models, there is a lot of uncertainty on the side of the companies because they know that all governments are talking about it, and maybe one day there will be some kind of international rules as well coming, also affecting this kind of models. So I think that regulation can also be seen as an element that gives legal certainty, and because there is legal certainty, there is development, and especially there is use, because what is the point of putting artificial intelligence in products or services that will not be used simply because people fear them or fear their impact? So this is the overarching objective of the regulation: create trust in the use of this technology. And the rules will apply equally to European or Americans or Chinese companies that want to operate on the European market. So we have created a level playing field. When it comes to data, however, we say that if the data sets used, these are data collected in the European Union, then already there we presume that the data governance is okay, and so companies will not have to share anything. So somehow we prefer, if you want, the use of European data to the use of other kinds of data, because we know that we have rules in place where we can trust the way the European data are put on the market.
Sie haben gerade das wichtige Wort Trust genannt, also Vertrauen in eine Technologie. Entwickelt man ja auch vor allen Dingen dann, wenn man sie besser
evolve when you know the technology better. And in fact, many companies in Germany so far have not been utilizing AI, and also citizens in Germany sometimes are afraid of this kind of technology. At the beginning, we heard from Mr. Erdner that AI might make a contribution to the three challenges: decarbonization, demography, and also in other areas. So, Ms. Christmann, I would like to know from you, how well is Germany equipped when it comes to the knowledge and the application from the educational institutions to the companies? How well are prepared for this revolution that we are experiencing at the moment? Well, I think at the moment we are not really well prepared. And of course, we have to distinguish between regulation and societal change that we have to shape together in the different sectors. Education, for example, is quite obvious. So the automated creation of texts. So the question is, what are good exam questions in the future, or what is a good homework, and what does no longer make sense? But this is something that the educational sector has looked into, and we will not be able to regulate this via an AI regulation. And maybe there are also other formats in the educational sector that might lead to the main objective and not necessarily a specific homework. So the situation is changing. AI is contributing to the change in many sectors, but regulation cannot always be the answer. Very often the question is, we have a process, and what do we need for the further development in our society in different areas?
How many ChatGPT homework pieces have you received? In my course that I run, there is no homework. There are no home papers. We did things before. But truly, often the fact is, from my point of view at least, when you're better than it used to be done earlier on, previously, it automatically is more resistant to tricks. It's also the confidence, the trust with your 24 people that you have in a year in your course. You know them well. It's hard for them to lie. True, it doesn't protect you from plagiarism, but what I can say, at German schools, homework certainly is done with ChatGPT, no doubt about it. So, of course, undoubtedly, is that good or bad in a concrete application? At the moment where it is clear to everybody that this is the case, it's urgently necessary to deal with technology. My fear is that, like with any, well, no, I'm somebody for 15 years found fault with us not materializing technology. I was on the train from Dresden to Berlin. There was no internet connection throughout the distance. We still have the same problems from yesterday in educational system. You can do Abitur without having any heard about how a computer works, let alone AI. So school leavers won't know. The old things are still around. Now new things come on board. I don't have a better message to spread, but the changing the tests and the exams that they're resilient against fraud is one of the easier tasks. The more difficult one would be, but also hasn't been around since yesterday only, when do children and youths and students in a world that keeps changing continuously so rapidly, what do they have to learn? That is the question. What will they need to learn? Is Goethe still sufficient? Or do you maybe have to feed in the one or other new content into the teaching? I've been in about it for years. We're not having teaching units about disinformation in the internet. I've been working about it for 6 years, trying 16 states that it should happen in the teaching, in the classroom, about analyzing disinformation. As bitter as it is, every time it's the same thing in any of these exponential high-speed developments, the educational system is hit the hardest. There's more sympathy that is needed for education. Mr. Andrulis, 2023, informatics is still not a mandatory school subject. You rely on specialists, on young talent in order to grow. What would be your rating? Does it urgently need an educational revolution to get to terms with AI? I am convinced that we need to tackle the educational system. There are a couple of good points that are around. It doesn't mean everybody's got to be an information scientist. No. We're fortunate enough that we can recruit internationally. We're fortunate enough that we have an extraordinary European company. We're so attractive that we can get researchers from Microsoft from the US. This is a situation where many European German companies are not found. There is a shortage of skilled persons. Yes, education is one of the great challenges of our time. This includes computer literacy, technology literacy. How do we use AI in education? How do we prepare the next generation for a world where AI will, with a high speed, get better? How do we prepare them? In the US, did a writ for AI and for a court, and they quoted judgments that did not exist, a development that may overtake us, and which not only focuses on more information scientists. No, that is not the only question. Let me raise, it's happening already. The nonsensical rule will be set aside that IT specialists have to speak German when they come to Germany. It is sufficient for them to speak English. For most companies, that would be sufficient. And we will reduce the time of professional experience that it takes from 3 to 2 years. So we're trying to enable things to happen, to facilitate immigration. Informatics has been driving me around as a school subject. Mecklenburg-Vorpommern introduced it several years one behind another, and more people study informatics or information science or cybernetics. Other states of Germany should copy from that. Another effect that I'd like to, she transforms IT for more women in digitalization where I work. And with the mandatory subjects, you can also get girls on board and to close the competency gap that arises because the boys are in the voluntary schemes and the girls don't do it. So the mandatory subjects, from my point of view, urgently needs this change. mandatory informatics teaching on top of social subjects, which are important, of course, but having that as a foundation would be a gigantic progress in view of the shortage. Not easy to do. There is a shortage of IT people. We can discuss that further on in a different round. First, the Cultural Ministers' Conference has to wake up regarding informatics. Let me move on again. We talked about disinformation. For Sioli, we have the elections for the European Parliament. We're looking to the US and the forthcoming presidential elections. What role does the topic disinformation play regarding elections on the European level? Do you fear that with this great leap in technology, the problem will be stepped up?
Well, it is very likely that this problem gets a little bit stepped up or exacerbated with the new technologies. I have to say that the problem was already there before, because I think that with social media, basically the big problem of disinformation really emerged. In the European Union, we have a series of fact checkers, and we also have the Digital Service Act, which helps or which creates obligations for the large platforms to check misinformation, and they have this kind of responsibility to help us to fight this problem. However, with these large AI models, however, they not always are captured by this kind of rules. For example, I think that OpenAI is not one of the big tech platforms that fall under the Digital Service Act. So the problem becomes bigger, and I can tell you that in the United States and also at the federal government level, they're very well aware of this problem, and they're very much thinking also what they can do to counter the issue. So from this point of view, we have to be very attentive. As I said, in the European Union, we already have some tools, from the fact checkers to the rules on the large platforms. We will have to see if these are sufficient, or if we need to do more on the side of the large AI models.
Gut. Ich würde gerne das Panel öffnen für Ihre Fragen.
I would like to open the panel for your questions. Thank you, first of all, for your Slido participation, which is very high. Más o menos, it keeps a balance between opportunities and risks. You may keep asking questions online. I'll have them first with the analogous approach. I'll ask you just one question, short and snappy. Silke Hahn from Heidelberg, from Heise Medien. I would like to pick up what Christian Stöcker, but also Jonas Andrulis said about digital savviness. What should our children, our pupils and students learn? There's an initiative in Baden-Württemberg, sort of a possible national platform of AI. Daniel Jung does it. Most helpful maths teacher. He created an AI model from 3,000. He has semantic AI training. He doesn't want OpenAI or Google to copy my videos and then generate at the top of a button, generate a clone. What is your concrete question? The concrete question on the topic is, what concrete ideas have you got, Herr Stöcker? That is what I would be interested in. You have intensively dealt with the question. What needs to be learned now for youngsters to be well prepared? There are other people than me that think about that more and that know about the educational systems. There is a whole gamut. The 4 C's, 4K, creativity, collaboration, critical thought. I can't think of the 4th C right now, but it is about doing things in cooperation. It is a social component that is essential, and querying and questioning things that you encounter. And having a critical acclaim, a critical judgment vis-à-vis things that come from the network, from the web, and having the necessary tools to cope with it. In summary, I would say it is a school training which would need to more get closer to an academic instruction, where methods of learning are learnt, and less knowledge itself that is learned by heart. It's good to have knowledge, all right, to have a structure, and to know when was Napoleon and Frederick the Great, before or after. I mean, having some general education certainly is a good thing. It will be important. Yet, too many facts actually will be available at the tip of a finger with an open question into the empty space. And the question is, how can I have interaction with the word in a more optimum shape for a cohabitation in this world which is worth living in, where all the knowledge that theoretically is available with one call into space. This is a world that we're moving into, or a world, a wonderful idea which we haven't talked about yet. During our lifetimes, we will be living in a life where everybody, every person in this world can talk with everybody in his own native language, in his mother tongue. That's absolutely sure, certain. Maybe there will be certain dialects in some mountainous regions. Swabian, maybe. Well, we'll have to see if a dialect works. That still needs a lot of work, but the word will change dramatically. And the question is, what does it take for a civil citizen, for a sovereign citizen? A question to you, which I'd like to pick up from Baden-Württemberg. That's why it has priority. The user would like to know from you, could you be more specific for cooperation between an AI startup and a company like SAP? What would that look like? Yes, I'm happy to comment. Our model speaks Swabian very well indeed. What we have built is an independent generative AI stack, i.e., everybody who wants to use that technology can get a license from us, and that includes one of the models up to double GPT-3 and multimodality, but also everything around it that's part of it, the code that's necessary to operate the model, to scale it, to monitor it, to fine-tune it, to customize it, to link it to your own data. All that is built at a company such as SAP can license the technologies in the protected sphere, can operate in your own computing center or in the cloud, of case wherever you are, and then you can use it and apply it to your own value creation chains, and can adapt it to your own data and have new transformative forms of value creation. What comes out of it with our partners and customers often is not simply a ChatGPT that has in your own SAP data, but new products, new forms, new options for customers or for the internal needs of the staff. From deep integration and a strong form of customizing, that's what it is thriving on. A question to Ms. Sioli in Brussels, also from the chat. It's about the topic of regulation and data protection and privacy. Vasily, the viewer would like to know, can the regulation at the European level, the AI Act, become a unique selling point internationally in the competition?
I think you're on mute still.
Einmal muss es passieren.
Okay. Certainly, sorry, I was muted. It can be a unique selling point, but you should not look at this act in isolation. in the European regulation context, because of course we have a general data protection regulation in Europe, which provides the rules for privacy and for protecting the personal data of the European citizens. And so when we talk about the Artificial Intelligence Act, we give it for granted that there is a regulation looking at data protection. And this is important because when we speak with the United States official, for example, they talk a lot about privacy and the fact that AI can violate privacy, and this is a big risk for them because they don't have the data protection regulation. When we speak about the AI Act, we don't talk a lot about privacy because we consider that is already protected by the data protection regulation. So often when we talk to each other, we almost talk on two different levels because for them privacy is something that they wish they could also a little bit respect better than they actually do at the moment. And at the same time, the Artificial Intelligence Act is linked, for example, to the Machinery Directive. So when an artificial intelligence system is embedded in a machine, then the machine has to undertake checks for safety, and the check addresses both the machine and the artificial intelligence system if it is relevant for safety. So we have really tried to address and put together different European level regulations in a way that are consistent and are not overlapping and are not creating red tape.
Dankeschön. Wir haben noch Zeit für eine Frage hier im Saal. Gibt es jemanden? Ja.
Ja, Jens Jankowski von der Industrie- und Handelskammer.
We have one more question from Brandenburg, from the Chamber of Commerce. We're dealing with the AI Act, indeed. My question is geared to that. AI is pretty complicated. I'll compare that to nuclear energy, maybe. There's an agency, the Atomic Energy Agency, to monitor these things. And I would favor if we had a regulation agency. My question, of course, is how will the AI agency be, what would it be composed of? Are there plans in the EU? Question is to whom? To Ms. Sioli? So again, to Brussels.
Okay, so the European Commission has not foreseen in its proposal of the AI Act, we have not foreseen the existence of an agency. But the European Parliament does, not an agency, but a sort of independent office that would be doing monitoring, maybe facilitating auditing, doing some technical checks over certain systems. And we have not yet agreed which kind of governance we will have, if it will be the European Commission with the member states that will enforce the Artificial Intelligence Act, or if it will be also done through the existence of an independent office. And this is one of the main things that we are going to discuss in the next months with the Parliament and the Council. And so we will see what the discussion brings.
Frau Christmann, die SPD-Co-Vorsitzende Saskia Esken hat ja auch schon...
Saskia Esken from the SPD favored a national AI monitoring agency. Do you share that request? And who could do that in Germany? Or would you say, no, there is no need for national monitoring? It's still under discussion, as we've heard. There's no decision on it yet. What you want to avoid, must avoid, is there will be an agency that is the bottleneck, and any SME to use that would have to go through the bottleneck government agency. That would not make sense. It would stymie all our ecosystem. It would be that in individual cases on fundamental questions that we had, likewise, social scoring and visual monitoring, there will be an actor who is determined to follow up on that. Maybe so. But one agency for everything, no way, no, I would not say. This is not realistic. And it's also difficult to relate that to data protection. The Federal Commissioner for Data Protection would not say that it promotes the best way of sharing information. On the contrary, in the General Data Protection Regulation on the European comparison, we have a red lantern. We're too thorough in implementing it. In the Data Protection Regulation, you can overdo it. We should not repeat that on AI again. To round it off, let me again address the world market leader, Baden-Württemberg, Mr. Andrulis. You have the option again to utter your direct request here at the capital city. What has to be concretely approached so that startups also in the future will have an opportunity in the competition? I think we're all agreed that regulation can't be avoided and that we need it as swiftly and unproblematically for all companies. And all companies will be using AI in the future. The other point that Christmann mentioned is much more important from my point of view, for the technology to be actually employed. Administration may play a role, the security agencies may play a role, but it is true for any company. If we manage to apply AI according to our own values and employ it in industry and administration, it's not only digitalization, not only administration has to do jobs, also companies have to do new jobs and have benefits. New benefit of the value creation of the future can be ensured this way. This is the more important case. Where we manage with administration, with industry, with manufacturing, to get AI on the right speed track, on the high-speed track, then regulations, this hurdle will be mastered. I don't think in many cases I would agree, but we will make it work in the end. This is an options-oriented start and kickoff and also an end. Thank you to the excellent guests here in the public and those linked up to us. Thank you, Mrs. Sioli, to have given us this insight into the state of the regulation. Thank you, Mr. Andrulis, to have joined us as a practitioner, and thanks to the two of you for Christmann, Stöcker. Thank you to the public for your wonderful questions. Thanks to the host. I wish you a wonderful evening. Keep talking about it in analogous fashion. It's fun. Thank you for having been with us. All the best. Have fun.